Okay, welcome to the last of the online lessons in phonetics. Today's subject, as you can see, is the one of intonation. And if you look in our textbook, you can see a definition of what intonation is. It's described as systematic variations in pitch in longer stretches of speech. Basically, one word is picked out as being more important than the others, and stress is placed on that word within the sentence. Why do we need something called intonation? Well, once again, our textbook is the source of the information here, so you can have a look at the chapter in the book to read more about this. But there are basically four functions of intonation. One is an informational function. We need intonation to break up speech into sentences and clauses, and also, as I said, intonation helps us to hear which words are the most important. There's secondly a communicative function. Intonation helps the listener to work out whether the message is, for example, a statement, a question, a command, or a request. And even animals are pretty good at listening to intonation. For those of you who have a dog, for example, you will know that your dog understands the difference between a polite request and a command by the tone of your voice. Thirdly, there's a grammatical function of intonation. I'm not going to go into the examples here, but we can express different grammatical functions by using different intonation. And finally, there's an attitudinal function. From intonation, we can tell, or we can have an indication of how the speaker feels or what attitude the speaker has about the message itself. And we'll see some examples of this as we go on. If you look at the chapter in the book, there are a few technical things which we need to understand before we can start to talk about intonation. And you'll again see examples of this as we go on. The first thing that the chapter talks about is something called a tone unit. A tone unit is a bit like a sentence, if you like. We break up speech into smaller parts, into tone units. And as you can see, they are marked by a vertical bar. For example, she is from Sweden. So this division into tone units is a little bit like dividing writing up into sentences and using commas, etc., to break up sentences themselves. So basically, the longer and more information there is, the more likely we will divide things up into tone units, into smaller parts. Within the tone unit itself, we can look for the nucleus. The nucleus is the most important word in the tone unit. It's the word which is stressed the most. And to mark the nucleus, we can add a tone mark before the stressed syllable in the nucleus to show that this is the word which is the most important. The neutral placement of the nucleus is on the last lexical word of the tone unit, so that's usually where the most important word is, at the end of the sentence. When we're writing, it's difficult for us to show a tone unit, or a nucleus I should say, what's the most important word, although sometimes in writing we use italics or we underline or we use capital letters to indicate emphasis. Finally, as I mentioned, a mark is placed next to the most important word in the sentence, and these marks indicate whether the pitch is falling, rising, or using other kinds of tone. The most common types are falling and rising, and then we have the full rise tone, which we're going to look at here, although there are other types of pitch as well, but these three are the most common in English. Falling tones are the most frequent type of pitch used in the English language. The book makes clear that there's no direct connection between tone and meaning, although falling tones tend to indicate something is finished and definite. Let's look at some examples of falling tones, and hopefully some of the things I've talked about earlier will start to make sense. Here we have all of the examples. I apologize if the overhead is not clear, but again, I'll be placing this on ping pong so you can have a look at it in more detail. This is a summary of the chapter in the book which talks about intonation, and here are the examples given of when falling tones are used in English. As I said before, falling tones suggest something is finished, that there isn't any more information to come. So we have statements. The young man is an English teacher, and you can hear that the stress is on the word English here, not teacher, but it could be on teacher, but here the stress is placed on English. He's an English teacher, not a German teacher. So English is probably the most important word here in terms of information. The young man is an English teacher. It's a statement, so you can hear that the tone is falling. The young man is an English teacher. We also use falling tones in some types of questions, questions as they're called, questions which begin with where, what, and even how. For example, where are you going? Where are you going? Where are you going? The pitch is downwards. We also use falling tones with exclamations. What a beautiful dress! What a beautiful dress! Again, the pitch is downwards. Falling tones are used in commands. Sit down, sit down. And also, falling tones are used at the end of enumerations. For example, when we count. If you listen carefully, you can hear that we go up and then finally we go down. So at the end of enumerations, we go down in our pitch. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we can hear from the downward pitch that we're at the end of the enumeration. Otherwise, we will be waiting to hear something more. For example, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we can hear something is coming. But when we use the downward pitch, we know the information is finished. 1, 2, 3, 4. We use falling tones in these kind of questions. Would you like tea or coffee? Tea or coffee? We go up and then we go down. Then we have something called a tag question. There are two types of tag question, and the first type is not really a question. She's ready, isn't she? She's ready, isn't she? These kind of tag questions that are called, they're more polite conversation. We know the answer already, so we use a downward pitch. She's ready, isn't she? And then we have an example of an attitude tone. These kind of questions which we can hear from the pitch used express boredom or disapproval. For example, she's arrived, has she? She's arrived, has she? The person making the statement, or the comment question as it's called, is not too happy about the fact that this person has arrived, and they express this by using a falling tone. Finally, we have thanks and greetings, apologies, and here we use a downward falling tone to express real gratitude. For example, thank you, thank you, thank you. So to summarize, falling tones are the most common type of pitch used in English intonation, and they suggest that something is finished, there isn't any more information to come. Statements are the most common type, but we have other examples as we've seen. Rising tones are the second most common type of tone used in English intonation. And in contrast to the falling tones, rising tones often suggest that there's something to follow. Once again, we have examples taken from our textbook. All of these examples you can find in the chapter on intonation. Rising tones are used in some types of question, not the w type as we saw before, but in yes-no questions. If the answer is either yes or no, we use rising tones. For example, is it true? Is it true? We use rising tones in echo questions. Somebody says they met in London. The person replies, where did they meet? Where did they meet? They use rising tones. They are not quite sure if the information is correct or not. Then we come back to the tag question. As I said before, there are two types of tag question. The first type is not really a question at all. But the second type, the one we have here, this is a real question. She's ready, isn't she? Isn't she? This time we go up at the end of the sentence because it's a real question. Once again, we have comment questions, but this time expressing surprise or doubt. Somebody says they've just won £1 million on the lottery, and the reply is, have you? Have you? We go up. As we saw earlier, at the end of these kind of phrases or questions, we go down at the end, but before we go down, we go up. For example, are you free on Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays? Up, up, down. And once again, with the enumerations, 1, 2, 3, 4. We go up, 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 until the last part. In contrast to commands and requests, we use rising tones. So instead of the sit down, we use a more sit down, a more polite request, using a rising tone. Rising tones, in contrast to falling tones, suggest that there's more to come. For example, in this adverbial clause, just as I was leaving, the letter arrived. Just as I was leaving, the letter arrived. So we go up when there's more information to come. Just as I was leaving, the letter arrived. We use rising tones in the beginning of these types of clauses. Again, the person is expressing their attitude, their feelings towards something. Here is an example of that kind of use of rising tone. You know, she's very young. You know, she's very young. The person probably feels that this woman is too young for the situation concerned. We use rising tones with greetings and farewells, bye, and also the thank you, which we saw before. The genuine thank you is a falling tone. We have the routine thank you, the kind of thank you that you might hear on a bus or in McDonald's, where the person is just using this phrase all day long. It's a routine expression. So instead of the genuine thank you, we get the routine thank you, thank you. It's not as genuine as it could be. So to summarize again, falling tones, the most common in English, used to express that something is finished, there isn't any more information to come. Rising tones suggest that there is more to come, although there are lots of other examples where we use falling and rising tones. The final group of tone that I want to look at is the fall rise tone. We have a fall and then a rise together. And these often express some kind of hesitation or reservation, but also used to express contradiction. And here are some examples of the fall rise tones. Once again, these are taken from our textbook. And as I said before, they express some kind of hesitation. Here are some examples. Well, probably. We go down and then we go up. We use fall rise when we're contradicting the information we've just heard. For example, it wasn't Elizabeth, but Jean. It wasn't Elizabeth, but Jean. We use full rise tones when we're surprised about something. Is that our English teacher? Is that our new teacher? And then we use full rise when we want to be very careful in how we give information. For example, we want somebody to do something for us. John, open the window. John, open the window. And once again, two more examples where we want to be very careful in our use of intonation. Imagine the situation where we have a young child who's very close to doing something quite dangerous. As a parent, we might use this kind of intonation, not to scare them too much. Be careful, be careful. And finally, we have the kind of intonation used between two people who care a lot from each other, and want to apologize. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. That kind of use of full rise. Just to summarize, once again, intonation is used to express, attitudes, grammatical differences, but also it helps the listener to understand what the message is about. The main use of, in English, of these tones is the falling tone. That's the most common use in English, and maybe in other languages such as Swedish, it's more common to go up in sentences than in English, which generally tends to like to go downwards. Falling tones are the most common. We've looked at some examples of where they're used, but basically are used to express when something's finished, in statements, for example. Then we have rising tones, which are used when there's more information to come. And finally, we have the full rise tones, which are used to express some forms of hesitation. These are the three main types of tones used in English, but there are three more other types which are mentioned in the chapter on intonation, which you can look at when you look at that chapter. Thank you.